by Callie Hart. Glassmaker. No, absolutely not. Not here. Not in my furnace. Elroy glared at me like I was a four-headed serpent and he didn't know which one of my heads would strike him first. I'd upset the old man a million different times, a million different ways, but this disapproving look was new. His expression was one of equal parts disappointment and fear, and for the briefest of moments I'd questioned my decision to bring gold into the workshop. Where else would I have taken it, though? The loft over the tavern where Hayden and I had been sleeping these past 6 weeks was infested with cockroaches and stank worse than a sand badger set. We found a way into the Mirage through a damaged section in the cracked slate roof. We were quiet where we crept in there to sleep amongst the rotten, long-forgotten wine crates and moth-eaten stacks of heavy-folded canvas, and so far we hadn't been discovered. But my brother and I weren't stupid. It was only a matter of time before we were found out, and the proprietors of the public house evicted us from their attic space at the end of the blade. There'd be no time to collect our belongings. We didn't have any belongings aside the clothes on our back. Hiding the gauntlet there would be folly. Elroy's workshop was the only place I could take it. No matter what, I needed to use the furnaces. I didn't have a choice. If I didn't melt down the metal and make something else out of it, very gods cursed quickly, the gauntlet was a milestone around my neck that would wind up getting me tortured and killed. It's bad enough I had to tell Jarvis Wade that you weren't here an hour ago. He was furious, said you'd broken some trade agreement with him. But then you show up here with that thing? What the hell were you thinking? The despair lacing Elroy's voice made me regret showing it to him. Why did you take it in the first place? We'll have Madra's vipers scoring this place with a fine-toothed comb searching for it. When they find you, they'll flay the skin from your bones in the square for everybody to see. Hayden will be right there next to you, and me? Me? Even if they do believe I had nothing to do with this, they'll take my hands for even allowing to bring that thing under my roof. How am I supposed to make a living with no hands, you stupid, stupid girl? Elroy's business was glass. With an abundance of sand at his fingertips, he made it his life work to become the best glassmaker and glazier in all of Silverian. All those living in the hubs were rich enough to afford windows, though, and there were people who lived in the third who saw other items that could be forged in the earth. Once upon a time, Elroy used to make illicit weapons for the rebel gangs who fought to overthrow Medra. Rough-edged swords made from scraps of iron, but mostly knives. The blades were shorter and required less steel. Even though the pig iron was of worse quality, it could still be honed into an edge sharp enough to send a man to the makers. But as the years had passed, life as an insurgent within had grown untenable. Fresh food was impossible to find. In the streets, children clawed each other's eyes out over a hill of stale bread. The only way to survive the third now was by barter and trade, or by whispering secrets about your neighbours into a guardian's ear. As a resident of the third, if you weren't dead or dying, you were hungry, and there wasn't much a starving person wouldn't say to quell the ache of an empty belly. After too many close calls to count, Elroy had declared he wouldn't be hammering out any more of his vicious needle-like knives, and told me I wasn't welcome to forge them in his fires any more, either. We were to be glassmakers, and nothing more. I'm stunned. Stunned. I can't even comprehend. The old man shook his head in disbelief. I can't even begin to fathom what you were thinking. Do you have any idea what kind of doom you've brought down on our heads? When I was little, Elroy had been a giant of a man, a legend amongst even the most dangerous criminals that ran the third. Taller than most, broad, his back muscles straining beneath his sweat-stained shirt. He'd been a force of nature, a pillar of rock hewn out of a mountain, immovable, indestructible. It was only recently I'd begun to understand that he was in love with my mother. After she was killed, little by little, piece by piece, I'd watched him wither away, becoming less of himself, becoming a shadow. The man that stood before me now was barely recognizable. His calloused hand stood as he pointed at the polished metal glittering like sin on the table between us. You're taking us back, is what you're going to do, Cyrus. A huff of laughter escaped me. The forgotten gods and all four fucking winds know that I'm not. Not after everything I went through to get it. I nearly broke my damned neck. I'll break your damn neck if that thing isn't out of here in the next 15 minutes. You think I'm just going to walk up to the sentry post and hand it over? Don't be ridiculous. God, why do you have to be so ridiculous? scale the wall again and toss it back into the hub once the twins dip. One of those inbred bastards will find it and return it to the Guardians without a second thought. They won't even realise how much the damn thing's worth. Gritting my teeth, I folded my arms over my chest, trying to ignore how prominent my ribs felt beneath the fabric of my shirt. My skin prickled with sweat. I was losing moisture I couldn't afford to part with. I'd left my water ration hidden inside a wall in the attic back at the Mirage. I hadn't been able to risk someone trying to jump me for it whilst I was picking pockets. And the workshop was hellishly hot as per usual. I couldn't count how many times I'd passed out the bellows here. I had no idea how Elroy survived it. For a moment I gave the man the respect he deserved and considered his demand. And then I fantasized about what a cool breeze from the south might feel like, and the delirious weight of a full stomach and how blissful a featherbed might be, and what a future for Hayden might look like, and my affection for the man who'd once loved my mother dwindled into insignificance. I can't do what you're asking me to do. Cyrus! I can't. I just can't. You know we can't go on like this. I know that struggling to scratch out a life here is better than bleeding out in the fucking sand. Is that what you want? To die in the street in front of Hayden? For your body to rot in the gutter like your mother's, stinking and picked over by crows? Yes, of course that's what I want. I brought my fist crashing down the table and the gauntlet jumped, a cascade of rainbows leaping up the walls. Yes, I want to die and ruin Hayden's life. Your life, I want to be made a spectacle of. I want everyone in the ward to know me as the glassmaker's apprentice who was stupid enough to steal from Madra's garden and get herself killed for it. That's exactly what I want. I'd never spoken to Elroy like this before. Ever. But the man had experienced loss after loss at the hands of the city guardians. People he'd loved dragged from their beds and executed without trial. His own brother had died just before I was born, starved to death during a particularly hard year because Madra wouldn't divert any food from the hub to other parts of the city. The richest of the Queen's people had to continue to throw lavish parties, and dined on exotic imports sourced from the pastures well beyond Hayland, had drunk their fill of expensive rare wines and whiskies, and all the while the people of Zilvarian had starved in the streets or shit themselves to death. Elroy had borne witness to all this. Even now he barely survived from week to week himself. If the Guardians weren't pounding on his door checking to make sure he wasn't making weapons, then they were kicking it down. Mythical magic users who didn't even exist. He allowed it all to happen. Just sat there and did nothing. He'd given up, and there wasn't a single part of me that could accept that. Elroy's heavy brows shot through the grey, bunched together, his eyes darkening. He was about to launch into another one of his rants about staying out of the Guardian's way, avoiding drawing attention to ourselves, about cheating death who was a daily miracle, that he thanked the makers for each night before he passed out in his shitty cot. But he saw the fire simmering inside me, ready to burn out of control, and for once it gave him pause. You know what I thought? I did. I thought the same way you want to fight now. I gave everything I had, sacrificed every last thing I held dear. But this city is a beast that feeds on misery and pain and death, and it's never full. We can throw ourselves down its throat until there's none of us left, and we won't have made the slightest lick of difference, Cyrus. The people will suffer. The people will die. Madra's reigned over this city for 1,000 years. She will live as she has ever lived, and the beast will still feed and demand more. The cycle will go on forever until the sand swallows this cursed place and there's nothing left of us but ghosts and dust. And then what? And then there will have been the people who fought for something better and the people who laid down and took it, I spat. Snatching up the gauntlet, I made a tear up the workshop, but Elroy still had a little speed left in him yet. He grabbed my arm, holding me back long enough to look me in the eyes. Pleadingly, he said, "What if they track you down and realise what you can do? The way you can affect myself, it's a parlour trick, Elroy. Nothing more. It doesn't mean anything." Even as I spoke, I knew I was lying. It did mean something. Sometimes objects shook around me. Objects made of iron, tin, or gold. Once I'd been able to move one of Elroy's daggers without touching it so that it spun around and around on my mother's dining table, balancing on its crossguard. But so what? I met his exasperated gaze. If they track me down, they'll kill me for a slew of other reasons before they kill me for that. He huffed. I'm not asking for you. I'm not asking for me either. I'm asking for Hayden. He's not like us yet. The lad still laughs. I only want to keep that innocence a little longer. and how he's going to do that if he watches his sister hang. I tore my arm free, my jaw working 1,000 cold hard insults clambering over one another, competing to be the first out my mouth. But my anger had fled me by the time I spoke. He's 20 years old, Elle. He has to face reality at some point, and I am doing this for him. Everything I do is for him. Elroy didn't try and stop me again. There were ways in which Hayden and I were similar. His height, for instance. We were both tall, lanky creatures. We shared the same sense of humour and were both champions at holding a grudge. We both adored the briny, sour tang of the pickled mingrows that the skiff merchants occasionally returned from the coast with. But apart from our shared personality quirks and the fact that two of us loomed over most people in a crowded room, there wasn't much about us that was alike. Where I was dark-haired, he was light. His was curly to the point of chaos, and there was so much of it. His eyes were rich, liquid brown, and bore a gentleness to them that my blue eyes did not. The cleft in his chin came courtesy of our dead father, his proud straight nose from our dead mother. She used to call him her summer child. She'd never ever seen snow, but that's what I had been to her. Her ice storm. Distant, cold, sharp. It didn't take long to find Hayden. Trouble had a way of following him, and I was an expert at seeking it out. So there was no real surprise. I almost tripped over him, sprawled out bleeding onto the sand, in front of the house of Carla. Carla, as it was known by most, was one of the few places in the ward that would trade food and drink for goods instead of money. A chancer with empty pockets and an empty belly could also gamble for goods with some of the tavern's more disruptible types if they were brave or stupid enough. And since we never had any money or items for trade, and Hayden was an outrageously proficient cheat at cards, second only to me and Silverian, perhaps, then it made perfect sense that he would be here trying to swindle a pitcher of beer out of someone. Blazing hot gusts of sand blew over Hayden. They gathered in little pools in the bunched-up material of his shirt, which still bore the handprints of whoever had grabbed him and tossed him out of Carla's onto his arse. A bawdy grump of revellers passed by, their scarves pulled up to their faces against the twins in the sand, stepping up over him without sparing him a glance. A young man with a split lip and the beginnings of a black eye lying in the gutter was nothing out of the ordinary in this part of the world. I stood at my brother's feet, folding my arms across my chest, careful to keep the satchel containing the gauntlet pinned against the side of my body. Pickpockets and cut purses weren't unusual here either. A crew of hungry street rats wouldn't think twice about performing a snatch and grab if they suspected the prize would be worth it. I kicked Hayden's dusty boot. Carrion again? He cracked an eyelid, groaning when he saw me. Again, you'd think the bastard would have better things to do than beat the shit out of me. The way he gingerly clutched his ribs suggested a few of them might be broken. I nudged him with the toe of my boot, considerably harder this time. You'd think you might have learned your lesson and would stay clear of him by now. Ugh, Cyrus, what is the hell? Where's your sympathy? In Carrion's back pocket, right alongside the money I gave you to buy water. I considered bruising the other side of his ribs, but the sheepish smile he sent my way doused my anger. He had that way about him. He was foolish and careless, more often than he wasn't, but it was very impossible to stay mad at him for very long. Offering him my hand, I helped him to his feet. After much grumbling and complaining, Hayden dusted off his shirt and pants and adopted a wolfish grin that implied he discarded the ache in his ribs and felt brand spanking new. You know, if you have a chit, I bet I could win back the water money and the red scarf Elroy gave me. Ha! Keep dreaming, buddy. I skirted around him and jogged up the steps of the tavern. As always, Carla's was packed to the rafters and stank of stale sweat and roasting goat meat. A dozen heads swung my direction as I entered, a dozen pairs of eyes going when they observed who had just walked in. Hayden was a daily visitor here, but I only ventured across the tavern's threshold when I'd had a bad day. I came to blow off steam, to fuck, to fight, a wild array of outrageous things that was whispered about me behind the backs of sunburned hands here. The man might either get lucky or be beaten unconscious depending on my mood when I sat my ass down at the bar. I didn't sit at the bar today. Peering over the drunken rabble before me, I craned my neck, circling for a flash of colour amongst all the dirty whites, greys and browns. And there he was, sitting at a table on the far side of the tavern with three of his dim-witted friends, his back to the corner so he could keep a weather eye on the crowd. Carrion Swift, the most notorious gambler, cheat, and smuggler in the entire city. He's also uncommonly good in bed. The only man in Silverian who could ever make me scream his name out of pleasure rather than frustration. His bright open air was a single flare in the dimly lit tavern. I beelined right for him, but my pathway was quickly blocked by a belugged-looking woman in her early 40s brandishing a giant wooden label. "No," she said. "Sorry, Bryn, but he swore he'd leave him be. What am I supposed to do, just let him get away with it?" Bryn had a surname, but no one knew it. When asked, she'd say she'd lost it as a child and never bothered to locate it again. She said family names made you easier to find, and she was right. As a proprietary of the House of Carla, folks who didn't know any better tried to call her Carla, presuming she'd named the place after herself. But she'd glare at them and show them